why I had to have this think tank with you all, because it has to do with you, Kelly. I got a call when I was running the deck. I got a text from a colleague. I was at lunch and she was on like one of the production associates. And she said, Nancy, there's a client, one of my clients needs a stage manager in Vegas tonight. Show text tomorrow. So I'm like, I'm coming to I'm almost there. I get into my computer, I open it up, and there was the client. I also knew the client, and they said, Nancy, we need a stage manager. They filled out our little form for tomorrow in Vegas, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, great. So I posted it to you all right away. Stage manager needed ASAP. Meanwhile, the camera operator comes running around the corner on the same show. I was like, Nancy, I have a client. They need a stage manager tomorrow in Vegas. I'm like, okay, I'm on it. It was just so cool, first of all, to see all the tempo people come around. But meanwhile, I'd lined up, a handful of you had applied, a handful of tempo teammates applied. But I always want, when it comes to stage managing and calling shows, I want to know what the show's like so I can decipher who's got the talent for this. And I said, okay, I've got a handful of show callers lined up. Tell me a little bit more about what you're looking for. And she goes, oh, no. I don't need a show caller. I just need a stage manager, just, to make sure people are mic'd and put them on the deck, put them on the stage. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a deck manager. But then I was like, is that what she thinks I've been doing for the past 7 days, making sure they're mic'd up and putting them on the stage? Because I have been holding hands with presenters that are praying with me before they hit the stage. I'm taking deep breaths with people backstage that are so freaked out. I am fixing bow ties. I'm handing out Cuban shots of coffee to your VP of sales. I am making sure there aren't cables coming up their back. I'm making sure the deck is flat and there's no bumps in the carpet. I'm making sure speaker time is working. I'm there for rehearsal, telling the presenter and the team where we're going next in rehearsal. Hey, prompter, can you help them? Hey, graphics, can you move that slide? Like, I was busting my ass for 7 days. And I was like, just want me to mic them up and put them on stage. So having said that, that's why we're here, because I want the world to know, and I want you all to tell us what you do. And what we do as deck managers is not miking someone up and putting them on the stage. Like, I was comfort. I was the first person they're coming back and hugging and crying because they had an emotional moment. Like, I was physically touching the vice president of sales. I have a note on my desk from him that I got last week that said, you're the linchpin of this convention. We couldn't do it without you. Like, yeah, ta-da, I'm off my soapbox. So start going, people. What did I saw hands going up? Miles, you want to say something? And
Well,
then
yeah, and I'll try to make this kind of quick. First of all, coming off of something that Lori said, if those of you who are interested, if you have not seen it, you've got to see Bathtubs Over Broadway. It's a documentary on the transition from traditional theater into corporate, and it is just absolutely amazing. And it was produced, directed by one of Dave Letterman's head writers, and it was released a couple years ago. It's available on Netflix. Bathtubs Over Broadway. But the real thing that I want to get into here just a little bit is I call the deck manager the invisible shrink. And what I mean by that is, we might be having coffee or drinks or whatever, but the irony of it is when I'm calling a show, it's like we don't really talk to each other. You are literally running in the deck and running in a parallel universe to me. And the reason I call a good deck manager an invisible shrink is because a good deck manager can come up to the biggest asshole vice president of marketing in the world who's used to having his sexist ways all the time and say, I need you in this spot in 5 minutes. Do you need to go to the bathroom? Is your badge off? Let me take it off. Oh, by the way, your zipper is down. Let's get that up before you go on stage. And that person will listen to that deck manager. I don't know how the hell they do it, but a good deck manager has that capability. It's about interpersonal skills. And remember, the CEO is probably, you're the last person they're going to see before they hit the stage. So I think it's a huge responsibility. I did it for my first 3 years when I wanted to get into the business, and I hated it. To me, calling the show is where it's at. And there are many deck managers out there who have no desire to call the show. They love what they do running the deck. And really, that's all I wanted to say.
Miles, that is going to be clipped again, and it's going to be on LinkedIn. That was beautifully said. Sorry, we're going to just be like the Miles show. You'll be the poster child for tempo.
Okay, thank you.
That was beautiful.
Move on.
Moving on. Who, Selena, did you have your hand up? Someone earlier was like,
I put it up quickly just because part of with the terminology that I ran into that's confusing to me is because in experiential, or at least on the planning side, you have a deck. It's a PowerPoint deck. And so anytime you're talking about a deck, you're talking about that. And so when I first started hearing deck manager, and when I've said it, I've had people come back to me confused because they're like, wait, no, I'm in charge of the PowerPoint. Like, I'm in charge of the Google Sheets. Like, so it's just an interesting kind of anomaly where it makes perfect sense to me why it's called a deck manager. But
Yep.
because you have something else that's being used, each presenter has their own deck that's
True.
going to
The
graphics.
presentation deck, yeah, from the
yeah,
Exactly.
that is so
corporate,
true.
yeah.
So I think you'll learn they're often called content managers for us, like, you
Yeah,
know,
okay, so
but that's also why when clients fill out our request for contractor form at Tempo, I ask them to, you know, I need them to click on the title of the job because that's how I match you all up. And then I make them describe it. Like, what is this person actually doing? I have a pair, like, open text, tell me what exactly they're doing. And then I'm like, oh, she meant content manager. She meant speaker support. She meant calling cues, like, you know, making sure people are mic'd and pushing them out on stage. So it's very common. And that's why I always get the roles and responsibilities of that role for y'all. So I don't set you up as a deck manager to go manage PowerPoint and all of a sudden you're next to the CEO who's a jerk and wants his zippers down. Like, you gotta know how to do it. What's up, Pete?
All right, so quick side note for everyone. Do you all know where the term deck comes from in theater?
Of course.
I'm
Oh,
guessing
maybe not everybody
maritime.
does.
It's maritime, exactly. There's a lot of terms in the theater that come from maritime operations. Back in, I think, the end of World War II, a lot of naval people went into the theater and used those
Interesting.
terms. So,
Even for Pete to give us
But
fascinating facts.
but some interesting things, like I have directed TV broadcasts, various types. I've stage managed and been an ASM for theater and for fashion shows. In the fashion show world, you can use a term stage manager. They may not know what you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah,
They may say model cure or something like that. Who knows?
yeah.
Or floor manager.
Yeah, I know
It's a different industry, but when you're queuing people, it's basically a stage manager's job. I've done that in fashion shows. You
Nice.
have to, like we said earlier about terminology, you have to know or adjust the terms to what you're doing all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and
Now-
rock and roll is gonna be different than festivals and
When
Yeah.
now as a professional theatrical stage employee, I see rock shows and theater shows all the time. To be honest, sometimes if the rock show is using our follow spots, the lighting designer is calling the cues for the follow
Yeah.
spots. Okay, not the stage manager. Usually the stage manager is making sure the band gets on stage. Sometimes they're in charge of where things
Yeah.
go
Yes.
for that show. So it varies a lot.
Yep,
What you do and what
And what industry,
responsibilities you need
for
to
sure.
do
Yeah.
for it.
Lori, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just gonna go back, riff a little on the deck and and the maritime relationship. It goes, I believe, even further back because that's why we call rigging what we have up in the air,
Okay,
right?
the
So
next
that's
think
all
tank's
part
gonna
of the
be on
same
a ship.
deck and rigging, all from the maritime. And that's why you don't whistle in a theater, because that's how they used to give the cues to the people up there holding the ropes, right? The rigging to drop the sandbag or the
What?
whatever it was. That's how they used to give cues, because they didn't have headsets
my
or
gosh.
that. So that's why you don't whistle. So it goes even further back than World War II, back to
Right.
the even olden days. And it's also one of the things you can use that all that sort of stuff. Another interesting thing, of course, is why it's upstage and downstage, because the
Oh.
stages used to be raked.
All
Right?
right. Okay,
And
we're gonna
which
have
they
a
are
think
not
tank, and
very
I'm gonna
much
put you all in charge of the history of theater and terminology. But today we got to talk about the best practices for being a deck manager.
All right, I've
So-
got a question.
Yes.
I often, to touch on to Lena's point, I often put in my like tasks that I'm good at, speaker handling or speaker management, to kind of evoke that more directly. My question for the group is, I have what I would consider in this industry possibly a talent that it is extremely difficult for me to become starstruck. I have yet to meet a person or a rank of person that I'm like, whoa. How do I phrase that? Or like, is that something I should be going out and telling people? Because like,
I think the way you phrase it is beautiful. I've yet
okay.
to, like, I think that's awesome. It shows your personality too.
Yeah, I'm like, I've had so many people like, oh my gosh, what if we get to meet Richard Branson? What if we get to, you know, whatever? Like, cool, man. Like, what's he
Yeah.
need from me? I'm so
Yeah.
like, it's so hard for me to get to that, like, wow, about like, they're gonna, you know, go and take a dump later today, just like I am. So I'm not too stressed about
Yep.
it.
That's it.
So, okay. And
I,
deck management is totally my jam. Nancy, put it on my list.
oh, I will. Yeah, I can add that for you. No problem.
I love to be the psychologist, taking the deep breath with the student who's about to go give their graduation speech. Yes, please.
Yeah. The lady that grabbed my hand and she's like in tears, will you pray with me? I was like, absolutely. Let's do this.
So good.
So, as a deck manager and like, I had Catalina, I was calling a show and I had Catalina on the deck with another, Laura Zingle. Y'all probably know her too from La Jolla Playhouse, and she's a theatrically trained stage manager, show caller, stage manager, and deck manager. And so I had those two paired on the deck backstage, and kind of training Catalina. And that's kind of what I wanted to get out of everybody today. Like, what's your secret sauce? What are the things? What are the tips and tricks? And the one thing I taught her was, I have a deck kit, and in it is not just spike tape and some Sharpies, but I have cough drops, I have throat coat, I have Band-Aids, which I used, I have heating powder when I'm freezing backstage, I have mittens, I have a printer. I always bring a printer, because when I get that show flow from the show caller, I will modify it for the deck. And for my stagehands, I take out all the crap that they don't need to see, because a lot of times stagehands will get lost, and I will make my own little backstage cue sheet, and I give it to hair and makeup, and I give it to the A2, and I give it to my stagehands so that they know. And Sherry Fox taught me that, so they don't have to read what audio is doing and what videos are playing. Like, they literally get to see the presenter, what our presets are, like what do we have to have on the stage before the show starts. So my stagehands are always like, Nance, I think the lectern goes up now. Like, those are the little things that I learned from Sherry. I learned, like, when you're setting furniture, do not spike that furniture. Do not put the tape on the deck until your video director sees it and your lighting director sees it. So they know it's not going to ruin the IMAX shot, or they've got good light, or you're under the wrong light. You need to move to left or right, or like, it's not just about you saying, oh, it's centered, looks great, let's move on. Like, there's a lot of other people involved in every move that happens on that deck, that you got to be able to know those things. And so if you want to be a deck manager, if you ever have the opportunity to share a deck with somebody, oh, it's golden. It's so awesome. So I just threw that out at y'all. Someone else tell me tricks, tips that you've done, that you've noticed, that the mistakes you've made, you'll never make again.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, take it, Sal.
Yeah, so when I was working as deck manager, I always had the question myself. It's like, okay, who's coming up? Who's, you get names, but you don't really get any, like, you don't know. Especially, I think Miles talked to this, when you walk into the room, you're on, right? So it's like, I always wanted to find that out and have that relationship right up front if I see someone. So what I ended up doing is figuring out what the event was, figuring out if they had any kind of agenda, go onto the website, look for photos. So I ended up getting those photos and figuring out who it is. I with the event person or whoever on the client side, who is also manages the CEOs or whoever. Hand in hand, we went, okay, these are people, etc. So I took that on, and it really helped me out. because I knew it was coming up. I knew what to expect. I found a little bit about them. It's a little more research on my end. It might be production. I just did it on my own because I wanted to find out, become more comfortable, those people. I did the same thing with what AV company are we using? Who do I know? All that stuff. So you become a little bit more involved in that respect, right? So I ended up doing that, and I do that now as a show caller. I put pictures on my ROS for the camera director, the A2, the A1, all those people, so they see who's coming up next, what the order is of the speak, and it really helped out. So that was my big thing. Aside from having all those tools that you mentioned, Nancy, that was my big thing, and I use it to this day. Every time I go into a new venue or something new, people everybody loves it. They're comfortable. Even my deck managers that don't do that I have, I give them a list. Hey, this is people you're expecting. We may rehearse out of order, but this is the order of the show. So that is just one little thing that I do. Really helps me out. Getting that relationship started already, so I can introduce myself as, good afternoon, my name's Sal, Mr. Glad to meet you, whatever. I know the name right front there. Sometimes they're taken back a little bit. Do I know you? Kind of thing. But you're already building that relationship right off the bat, even if you see them coming in the room, not backstage yet or whatever. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's a great tip. And you look good to your client, right? And you look good to their client. And that's what matters. You need to look good to your client, but you need to look good to their client.
Right.
You got to bring Cuban shots of coffee to your VP of sales, because the video team keeps making them, and he's like every morning, he's so happy. And my client doesn't even know I'm doing that. Like,
Right.
That's just
Exactly.
Yeah, I was
That's
gonna
great.
say this isn't really a tip, but what I've noticed is in that position, show callers really running the rehearsal or whatever, but everyone there is looking at you, right? Like they're coming to stage, they're looking to you to like help run through this rehearsal, whatever. I just feel like depending on the size of the show, that ends up being a lot of, you need to be in the know of what needs to happen with that rehearsal, because sometimes chaos is happening even with the show caller, and they don't even know what's going on backstage, what we're all talking about. I don't know. So I don't know if that anyone has tips, but I feel like
huge.
there's,
that's running
that
the
all
deck. Like when I'm in rehearsal, that's a really good question. And it's huge because like when we're in rehearsal, it depends on the producer. Like if I have a very hands-on producer, which I did on the last show I was on, he was the one that was in the client's face and talking to prompter and walking next to him. But then you know what? He'd go sit down and work with somebody else, and we got to keep rehearsing. So so I was always hovering and listening.
Mhm.
And someone in the back channel asked a question. I have a private channel to my stage manager and a private channel to my deck manager or my stagehands, and I would tell them, give them 5 minutes. They're talking about tomorrow's whatever. Like I
Right.
am constantly communicating to everyone who can't hear what's happening with the
Mhm.
producer and the client right there. And then when the producer would walk away, it was me and then the next client. And I'm like, all right, prompter, can you take us to the top? Because he wants to start at this paragraph. Like, so a good deck manager is going to be right there with the client on the presenter on the stage, talking to the stage manager and lights. And I'll never say the word geo when I'm on the deck. I definitely do that. But my stage managers appreciate that I'm always one step ahead and moving rehearsal along. And hey, can we make sure so-and-so's mic'd up because they're next? Like, yeah.
Great.
And you're really working in tandem with your deck manager. I mean, big time. And sometimes, depending if they have the budget for it, sometimes it's really hard because I've got some shows where there is no deck manager. So I had to depend on whoever on the client side, who is their handler basically, and talking to them and just being one-on-one with them and finding out what's going on as far as rehearsal. Show caller, you have to concentrate on all these other things you have to do, right? Cue calling and all the cues and what graphics, what sets are going on, all that. But become that as well if you don't have a deck manager. So you have to kind of do both roles. It's difficult sometimes. Sometimes I just go right down to the stage with my wireless headset on and I start, managing the deck while I'm still having to know that I have to call the show. Sometimes you have to do that. But most part, you are working tandem with them. And like you said, you have that second channel that you could probably speak in regards to whatever's happening on that deck.
Yeah,
So
the
Sal,
managers come from the client.
yeah, so I'm right now writing the blog with regarding, and you can answer this and just rephrase it out, or Sal, like when as an agency, as a production company or a client, like when do I know I need a deck manager, Sal?
Well, I believe, like Miles was saying, depending on the size of the show as well. I mean, how many moves you have on stage, how much furniture you have coming on, how many presenters you have, you know, and on the and if it's a client that doesn't have that uh, like person that knows the CEO or presenters. So most companies that I work with have someone that handles them. I just did a biotech one that I had a young lady that knew all the presenters for endpoints in San Diego, and she knew all of them. So I had a deck manager, but he was mostly concentrating on furniture moves and all that, not so much on the client. She was, and you know, and I had the A2 basically in there, making sure they're mic'd up and all that, make sure they look good. And then the last look before they went on stage was my manager looking at them, make sure they don't have a badge on or anything like that. But she handled the client, you know, hand to hand, right? So it all, I guess it depends on the size of the show and what your client needs are. Do they need someone to be there to make sure they're all ready to go, or is there someone that's going to handle them from green room backstage and then on so forth? So yeah, it's depends again, depends on the show.
Well said.
If I
What's up,
answer that. And so, well, Miles, we're gonna have to add something.
Kelly had his hand up. What's up, Kelly?
That's okay. No, I just wanted to say, you know, I'm new to this, right? Very much so, and still had all those questions. And I'd ask my friends, like, what's the difference between a show caller and a stage manager? What's a deck manager and a, you know, do you have assistant stage manager and all that stuff? So I've learned all of that. But I've done some show calling and deck managing through Nancy and through other companies as well. And I have to say, like Nancy, deck managing is my favorite. You know, it wasn't what I did when I was a stage manager in New York. I was a production stage manager on all my shows, and I had assistant stage managers, right? And now we call the assistant stage managers in the theater world. There's very few assistant stage managers, unless they're like a second assistant on a musical or something like that. But one of the things, you know, besides the kits, besides the taping, the backstage and the safetying and the spiking and all that stuff, that I think is so important for the deck manager or stage manager, whatever you want to call that person, is establishing those relationships, like Nancy mentioned, with the client and others have mentioned, and making sure, because you have to realize, no matter who they are, you know, this event I just did for Nancy was a clean energy with all the major trucking manufacturers and oil executives and the titans of the industry, right? And one of the things I always remind myself is they're just like everyone else, right? They could be nervous, they could be freaked out about going on stage, they could have stage fright, or they could be totally fine. And just so you meet them where they are, you understand what they need. You tell them, you know, stand here, go here, meet this person, do this, do that. You give them the tour, but treat them as people and individuals, and have great empathy to the positions they're in. Is how I, you know, find that how I tend to operate as a deck manager, right? I'm like, I'm here for you. I introduce myself. My name is Kelly. I'm your stage manager. I'm not the stage manager. I'm your stage manager. I'm here for anything you need. Absolutely. I show them where they need to go. I show them their pass. I introduce them to the A2. The A2 is my best friend in the entire world, because they're the one back there with me, right? They see the A2, then they come to me. So they're my best friend. They're like the number one person on the show who I like. You're my person. But you know, I hate to sound like this, but I kind of approach deck managing as kind of very holistic, right? You know, I know all this stuff about the backstage. I've done it my entire life, but the people management is what makes this most important, and what they'll most remember about you is like how calm you were, how you took care of them, how you gave them that Cuban coffee, you gave them that mint when they needed it, you know, and you're not freaked out. You've got your job down solid. And you give them that confidence before they go on stage, you know, so they can do their job. And so then the client is happy, and thus you get to work again, perhaps, right?
And you get little notes like this.
Yes, you get
So
little notes
true.
like that.
That was very well said.
Well said.
Yeah, but I love it. I love it.
And I would absolutely concur, because it is all about the relationships backstage, and well, anywhere, doesn't really matter. And I think you can approach it. You have the ability to approach it differently, I think, as a woman, because you can do all of those things that you're talking about and give that sense of, I'm mom, I will take care of you. Anything you need. Right? It's the same thing, but it gives you another, you can use another perspective, which is not open to the guys. Because as you read your executives, you can see what they need. Right? Some of them need that sense of like, let me check your hair. You got a little thing. You're right. Don't worry, I'm here. I'm your road mom. It's okay. Good to go. Goes, you can equally as well with women. Oh, look, if there's a little, there's a string coming out of your hem. Let me take care of that. So you can present, you can utilize both parts of the job and come at it from different directions, depending on your, who the executive happens to be.
Yep,
Which-
I love that, Mom. Kate, I saw you put your hand up, and then Danny, I know you raised your hand too. What you got, Kate?
Okay, I said, obviously, when I'm backstage deck managing or relying on a deck manager if I'm show calling, client is number one responsibility backstage there on the deck. But I always try to make sure and really value the deck managers, or try to do so myself, who include the crew and keep the crew engaged, take care of the crew as far as possible. You know, I mean, you get the things from your deck manager saying, hey, look, graphics is just is dying back here, you know. Yeah, I mean, so I consider the obviously the client comes first, but the crew is part of what I'm responsible for backstage as well.
That's awesome. Yep.
Yeah.
You know,
Danny,
go ahead.
go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, I posted a little story of kind of some of the things I face, and unfortunately it's more common than not. So what I want to ask y'all who do this on a much bigger shows, I'm finding that the stage manager role is not being taken seriously. It's a client's, you know, intern or somebody who's never done it before, and I'm usually doing 5 cameras and show calling and dealing with slide decks at the last second. Is my world just flat out weird? Is this the way it's going, or do I have crappy clients, or
You
what?
said PBS, right?
Well, it's a PBS television station, or it's a media place. But so we're starting to do third-party rentals for environmental companies and other media companies, and kind of like, you know, a PBS kind of look and feel.
Yeah.
So these aren't like huge corporations, but there are people that don't seem to understand, you know, the slide deck needs to be organized. It needs to be on PowerPoint because we don't have Keynote. And I'm just wondering if this is just the world I'm seeing, or are you seeing this as a trend because of budget or lack of understanding on how these things work?
Oh, don't forget,
I'm not,
You're not alone.
yeah, and
You're
also
definitely not alone.
you're in a broadcast environment, not a corporate environment. And we could have a 4-hour discussion on the differences, but I think that's part of what you're experiencing. That what you're describing rarely happens to that degree in a ballroom. I'm not saying there aren't mess ups and people that come into a ballroom that don't know what they're doing,
or
but
last minute slides.
broadcast is its own animal.
Well, so this place has a television station. It's
Right.
it's Channel 9, but it's not. This is not a broadcast environment. This is definitely it's similar to a ballroom, except it's a 200-foot theater, but there's breakout rooms and things like that. So it's the same kind of thing. You know, people come in the morning, they do their big event, they go do their breakout things, and then they come back in the evening and they do their big hoopla at the end.
You know
Um,
what it sounds like, Danny, is they could use some education, whether it comes from you or you in the meeting say, you guys, we need to bring in a producer that understands content and what needs to happen, and that knows that the content has to be in this order, and it has to be to the show caller before this day, and we should probably have a deck manager because there's so many things happening on the stage. I don't know, maybe it's time you start educating, you educate them, and I'm sure it's budget related as well. That sounds like PBS, because I used to work at PBS and the budgets are hard. But I think
Right,
it needs some education and a budget.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not PBS people. It just
Right.
happens to be happening. But
Yeah.
it is these organizations. And what I'm trying to understand is what I'm facing is not the way presentations or these events everywhere are going. It's just kind of the people I'm dealing with who feel that this isn't necessary, because then I can address it in that way. But again, this is their money,
Yep.
and it's
Yeah.
usually other nonprofits.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I just wanted to see if what I was facing surprises anybody, or is like, yeah, I get this every day. That's kind of what I was looking to find out.
I,
You know-
I get a lot of those. I do a number of last minute gigs in San Francisco that are things like award lunches and and things like that. Just and I call them young clients because they really don't understand what they're asking for. So I do try to do a lot of educating, and it's always very nice when I have a repeat client and I actually get more than 6 hours notice before I have to be over there. To try but
Yeah.
and each time I repeat with one, they do a better job, and I give them the kudos. But yeah, I call them young clients because a lot of it just comes
They
out
don't
of
know.
not understanding what is necessary. So it is a lot of education.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Well, it's funny.
Yeah.
It's
Steph, is
it's
that
funny,
you?
Danny, too, because yeah, this is me, Steph. Hi. It's funny because honestly, like that, hearing all of this and hearing things from my transition from corporate agency to freelance, like I'm sitting there thinking like I wore 38 hats every day on an event because I would run the deck as I was also show calling, and I would run rehearsals from the stage, and I would do all of these tasks. And it's just now in this transition, it's like, wait, you only need me to do this one part today? Like you guys have the budget to focus on just this one role and this one piece. And it's been almost like a breath of fresh air too, Nancy, to learn all of these different roles and how they really truly are separated, because in my agency world and how we had run them, everyone just wore so many hats all of the time and never really truly focused on the one thing.
I think that's why I like hiring people that come from agencies, and I'm not lying, because I know you can do so much. I've had more of my clients leave and go freelance. I'm like, come on over, because I know you can do it all, because I've seen y'all do it all. Yeah. And I mean, there's some shows where I had to call the show, and I still do them, where I am calling the show and deck managing, and I got my wireless comm on, got my cue sheet in my hand. There's still some, there's breakout rooms, and we do that. So it goes, they're still there, but it's not all it depends on the budget, depends on the room, depends on the show, because I still run rehearsals from the stage with my wireless headset on as well too.
And I would throw out
Yeah,
for Danny,
not just
keep your eye out. What I've been seeing is people who have had staff transitions since the pandemic, brought someone in between shows, and they're blindly cutting line items. And then once you're there, you're going, okay, either last time you had it or you're doing a totally different show. Why do you not have this position? And they're like, oh, because it was just a person and I couldn't see what they were going to do. So like, watch out and see how many of these people who are big problems are having big changes especially nonprofits post pandemic.
Yeah.
That's what I've been having people call me last minute to come in and rescue them with deck managing or whatever, because they're like, it turns out our staff doesn't want to do everything while we're running a gala at the same time. Like, yeah, I could have told you that 6 months ago, but cool.
Danny, I know that you're talking about these are rentals that come in, correct? Is that mostly what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, our internal folks are fine. I work with them all the time. We do live shows all the time
Okay.
out of this space.
Do you have Nancy puts out a sheet of basically what the client's needs are? Do they have something like that? Do you need this, and that? Because that can kind of be an idea of what you're looking at when they're coming in. And you can suggest, depending on budget, obviously, or non-budget, what you might need.
Yeah, so this whole aspect is a little new to KQED. It's a way of bringing in, additional revenue for a building that is brand new with all of this stuff. So there's a little bit of KQED trying to figure out how to do this, and it's kind of friends and family pricing and all of that. But when it comes to me in this room, it starts to be a little bit under a waterfall. So I just wanted to kind of get a feel of how what was going on elsewhere, so I could judge how out of family, to use an NASA term, how out of family what we're doing is. Does that make sense?
Yep. I just posted our roles and responsibilities of the positions that we fill at Tempo. And when we're looking for new clients, which is the first time in my whole life I've ever had to, I don't even have to do it. I'm doing it because it's fun. I'm looking for new clients for you all. I'm doing it because I have so many of you I want to get work for, and we don't have as many shows as we do people because we keep growing. I send them in my like second email to them when I'm just cold calling. I'm like, hey, if you're interested, these are the roles we fill. I know you have your own freelancers, but when you run out, this is the roles and responsibilities of a lot of our teammates. And so that's just a great doc too, to have in your back pocket. So you can show your clients, like, this is what people do. You can double some of them. Some of them you cannot, I don't know, something to, you guys are, I'm an open book. I'll share that, but we have gone long, but we started late, I feel like, because we were so chatty. But does anybody have any other questions or comments or tips they want to share?
One thing I do want to say, and this is sort of like, it's kind of unspoken. It can be political, but I also think it's important. And if you are deck managing, you're going to find yourself in this position. And that is simply, you have an interesting perspective of backstage. And what I mean by that is, you're the one that can notice, how does the A2 act around the CEO? How does he put the microphone on? Does it look like it's his first job and he's fumbling? Or does he approach it with confidence? You have an opportunity to observe things that most people don't. And this can come back and you can offer that information to certain people and it'll work for you. And that's about as specific as I want to get, but it's there, and you will definitely feel it.
Very good point.
I feel like I brought everybody down.
No, not at
No,
all.
but that feedback is so important. It
It
is
is very important.
very
And
important.
it's not throwing a teammate under the bus. It's looking out for your job and your client's next gig.
Wherever
Yeah,
you go,
'cause-
whatever you do, get, whether you call it a deck manager, floor manager, stage manager, whatever, get the definition, find out what their definition is. Make sure that is part of your job description. So everybody know, call it whatever you want.
Yep.
Just make sure you know what the job description is, who you're responsible for, who you report to, things like that.
Yep, I agree. Well,
Yeah, one of
this
the
was
first things-
awesome. What's up, Kelly?
I was gonna say, one of the first things I do when I walk into the room is go to the producer, who I may or may not know. Is like, what do you need from me? What are your expectations for me during this period we're together?
Yep, and I did
Even
the
even
same.
the job description is totally different. Sometimes it's different. It seems like, right? They're like, oh, I need you this, this, and this, and this. Or sometimes you just don't know. They just need someone in there, like with the thing that you brought me in for, Nancy, at the last minute. I go to the room producer. I'm like, what do you need from me? And he laid it all out. And I was like, great.
Yep. And how do you run the deck? Like that producer, I have the same show I've done for, I don't know, 10, 12 years now, but it was a new client, a new production producer, new producer. And I was like, how do you like to run rehearsals? Do you want to run them?
Mhm.
I'll stand back. He's like, yeah, I got it. And I was like, okay, great. Because the last
Yeah.
one I did it all. Like, so I just found out he wants to run it. And I go, okay, I got your back. I'll be right here. He's like, great.
Right.
I didn't
Right.
step on his toes. He's the producer. He's with the client. That's cool. I'm good. Like, no ego. I just want to be here. I just want to be what they
Correct.
want. Right. So yeah, find
Yeah,
out.
I think
That's
I-
a great tip, Kelly.
Yeah, and I think that term you used right there, no ego, is part of my philosophy. It's like I'm here to make the best event possible. It's not about me at any single moment. It's about making the event the most successful it can be by supporting client, by supporting crew, by making sure the backstage is safe and accessible and it looks great and everyone's happy back there.
Yep, I agree. And I love what someone said about your crew too. Like I had at one point 19 stagehands for a humongous move, Avista, and I had a meeting with all of them. I got all their names. I smiled and they're like, you're so much fun. That was so nice. Like you just treat everybody with respect and treat them like humans. You don't push a stagehand around just because they're only here for a couple hours wearing
No.
black. Like I get to know they will make you look good or bad. Like
Yeah.
we're all here to make each other look good, right? So yeah, I think taking care of your
So-
crew and being kind and treating them like humans.
Can I say
So
one
many
thing
times a
about
tech crew, is like not communicated with, and I don't realize it till you're in the thick of it or 3 hours in or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the one thing I want to say about crew, especially like your carps and your stagehands, whatever you want to call them, is like those guys have been around. They have experience. And the first thing, you know, when I'm told something needs to happen, I talk to my crew. I'm like, hey, how do you guys want to do this? Here's what we need to accomplish. So you get them invested, use their experience. And if their idea is usually the right idea, right? And so that's why I'm like, you trust your crew implicitly until you don't, right? Until you don't. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the protection of them is so important because
Yeah.
I did a show where when the rehearsals in the morning, the clients decided we're not going to come rehearse in the afternoon, we're going to come after dinner. So my producer went to the client and said, I'd like to let the crew go. We'll be back an hour before the execs are due. And the client looked at the producer and said, talking about the crew, don't they come with the room? They just expected us to sit there. Not, you know.
Sarah, you win for my favorite face of the
One
day.
needs to eat.
Yeah.
Like,
make sure-
I don't play poker or any other games where I must conceal my emotions because
Sarah did not like that comment. All right, friends. Well, we have kept you long, but I have loved this one. Thank you so much for sharing your tips and tricks and all that good jazz. I don't think we're going to have a meeting at Think Tank in July because I'm hitting the road with the family in the RV for a month. Wish me luck. But I will have Starlink, so I will be working. But I think we'll reconvene in August and